Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 254. Today we are talking to Andee Martineau. Andee is the founder of the Connect Method Parenting blog and the author of the book, Connect Method Parenting. She is all about building a better relationship with your kids, building more cooperation at home, and having lots and lots of fun with your family. This was a fun episode to record, and I really enjoyed the insights. Andee's parenting style and philosophies align really well with my own, and so it was interesting to talk to her. And she has had kids go through all different types of education, from traditional schooling to homeschooling and back again, and she had a lot of great insights. So you're going to love this episode. Pop those earbuds in, and let's get on with it after a word from today's sponsor. Are you a homeschooling parent with a child struggling with reading, writing, or spelling? Lexercise can help. Their online platform offers self-paced learning and expert instruction customized to your child's needs, all based on the Orton-Gillingham approach. We used Lexercise back when Logan was first diagnosed with dyslexia when she was, 8 or 9. And oh my goodness, the personalized support they gave us, the attention to detail, the program itself was just incredible. And Logan grew leaps and bounds. I'm so proud to have them as a sponsor for the podcast right now because more people need to know about their services. You can join thousands of families who have seen effective results, including mine, and have unlocked their child's love of learning. Visit lexercise.com/learners for a free learning disability screener and to learn more about their programs. Check them out and let me know what you think. Ask me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them or direct you to my contacts at Lexercise. But if you have a kiddo who struggles with reading, writing, or spelling, you definitely want to check out lexercise.com/learners and see what they can offer you. All right, let's get on with today's episode. I'm super excited to be bringing you a guest. I've just recently been reading her book, Connect Method Parenting, and I know you guys are all going to love her, and I'm super excited to be able to get to know her a little bit better. Andee Martineau, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to your audience, and I hope that what we talk about will benefit them, and they'll be able to have something that they can take away to make their life better, their homeschooling better, just things smoother. Because as a fellow homeschooling mom, I know the challenges. There's the beautiful joys of homeschooling, and then there's the challenges of not maybe having the break that we think we would get if they were at school. And so I understand the dance that we play, and I hope that what we talk about will be able to make that just a little bit smoother, because this is an experience that means a lot to us. We choose to homeschool because we care so much, and we want to create something great for us and our kids. So excited to talk about connection and parenting and homeschooling and all of the things that we're going to jump around into today.
I love that. And yeah, there's going to be so much that our audience gets out of this. So if you're listening, make sure you're taking notes, or you come back to the show notes for links for all of this, because it's going to be a great episode. Andee, why don't you take a minute and let us know a little bit about you, your family, your background, and just who you are.
Yeah, thanks. So I am a mom of 6, but what was really insane is I had them in 8 years, and don't ask me why. I think it's absolutely insane that I did that, but it was actually the perfect storm to show me all of the things that I thought I was going to be great at parenting. It just really revealed all of the gaps that I still had. So a blessing and a curse. My background's in nursing. That's what I did, I feel like, in a previous life, but I love science and research. And so when I started having problems with my parenting, I went to developmental psychology and attachment theory. I just started digging in deep, trying to figure out what I was missing. And I was doing all of the traditional parenting things that I thought were parenting, because I believed that the essence of parenting was me telling my kids what to do and not to do and getting them to be, really good. And really that discipline was at the essence. And what I found is that didn't feel so good. And the ways I was trying to get my kids to be good, it came from the best place. I think all of us we're trying to do the best we can and help our kids fulfill their potential. But I was doing it in a very corrective way. I didn't call it that back in the day, but it was very much, if you aren't doing this, let me give you this consequence, or let me incentivize you with a reward to try to get us all to do something better. And it worked for a little bit. And sometimes it would work really great in the moment, but in the long term, I felt like it just wasn't working. It just unraveled really quickly. And I remember there was this time, I had 5 kids at the time. My youngest was a baby. And so I was really tired. I was very exhausted. My oldest was at school. We hadn't started homeschooling yet. We started later that year, actually. But my 3 toddlers were remarkably quiet. And it took me about 30 minutes to realize, even though I had gotten so much done, feeling very productive, dishes, laundry, I was dressed, all the things, I realized, oh my gosh, my toddlers are very quiet. And that is probably a dangerous sign. I wanted to make sure they were alive. Then I heard some noises in our little playroom, which is just like a converted garage off of our kitchen. And I peeked in there and saw that they had somehow found a Costco-sized bottle of baby powder and literally doused the playroom, ruined, like it was insane. And as a tired, exhausted mom, I went in guns blazing, like, this is not okay. You're getting these consequences, no snacks today. And then I looked down at my 3-year-old, he's now 20. So it's been a while since I had this moment. I'm so grateful for this moment. So I'm all out of my mind, acting like the 2-year-old in the room, really. And I look down at my 3-year-old, and he's gone from so excited to show me this fun thing that they've created, because in his mind, he doesn't realize this is not acceptable. And he's crestfallen. He's starting to cry. He's a very expressive human. And I look at him, and something just magically, I didn't earn this moment. It was just this beautiful gift of me looking in his eyes and realizing, this is not the person I want to be for my children. This is not the person. And I was a little nervous to release my grasp on the consequences I wanted to give in that moment, but I did, because I just couldn't help but connect with this sad child that I knew was sad because of how I was misbehaving. And I connected with him. We had a little laugh about it. It was in retrospect, it's hilarious. I went and grabbed a camera because I don't think I even had a smartphone at the time. That's how long this is. I'm dating myself. So I grab a real camera. We take a picture of it, I'm so happy to have this image of this event now. And I had envisioned as I walked into the room that it would take hours to clean up this mess. And granted, like the electronics, like the DVD player, it never recovered. It was dead in the water from then on. But the mess itself was cleaned up really fast, in 20 minutes or something. It was very quick. And I didn't have to use any punishment, any consequences, anything. They were just so willing to help. And everybody, and 20 minutes is a long time for a 3-year-old to help focus cleaning up. So it was really miraculous. And I remember walking away from that thinking, I had a hunch that this would work, but and it wasn't that I was never kind and patient in the past, but this felt like a red alarm, this huge event. And I didn't have a lot of evidence in my brain at that time to support that I could have a really positive outcome from something, unless I had to leave I had to be controlling it. And so when I let go of the control and I went into that connection mode, everything just worked out so perfectly. And for some reason, my 20-year-old brain was really shocked by this whole event. And so I wanted to immediately step away from all of the punishments and consequences and all of the things that I thought were parenting. They're synonymous with parenting in my brain at that time. But I was really nervous because I felt really exposed. I didn't know what tools I would have left if I didn't have that, because I wasn't sure what it looked like. And so that's when I went to town and started doing all of my own research, because I needed the science. I needed to know this is a legitimate method of raising a human. And it didn't take that long before I started to realize, oh, that's how I would want to be treated. If my husband came home and was like, you have a consequence for not doing this thing we talked about, that would feel terrible. And that would just be weird. And yeah, that's how it all unraveled. And that's just shortly thereafter we started homeschooling. And I'm so glad that I was able to start to understand these principles of how we can connect and how we need to create relationships where our kids really want to choose us to be the person they listen to. So they want to listen to us, not so I get them to listen to me, because it really impacted the way I was able to show up. And things weren't perfect. And it took me years to figure this out. And even today, we're still all humans and recover quickly and all of the things, just we're figuring it out still, but it's so much smoother when you're leaning into connection instead of correction. But that, for some reason, that can be a little bit of a tricky dance and our brains get nervous, quite nervous. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. And we're still plugging away now that my oldest is almost 25 and my youngest is 15. So we've gone through all of these stages, even adult children now. And it's so fun. It works at every stage. It never stops working.
I love that part of that. You're setting, when you shift to, we talk a lot on this podcast about connection over correction. And I was just so pleasantly, I don't know, not surprised, but touched when I read that exact phrase in your book, because I say that all the time to listeners and to people in my community. And I try really hard to parent that way too. But like you said, it gets difficult when you're in the midst of things or there's a lot going on. But like you said, and we have the same, I have an 11-year-old, but I also have a 21-year-old. So we've
you've done the whole thing too.
Yeah, adult children. And I still have teens, 16 and 15. And it really, truly does work at every stage. And because we are human too, we do fall off and yell sometimes and lose our patience and get snippy. But because when we form that foundation of connection with our kids, we're so much more able to come back from losing our patience or losing our temper, because we can just go to our kids and say, okay, I was a little bit overwhelmed. I was really tired. Please forgive me for yelling. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. Let's try to solve the problem from here. And so I think that, like you said, it works at all stages and it sets up a foundation for long-term relationships with our kids. We're not raising kids. I think we forget about that. We're raising people, and they're growing into their own adults, and we want them to want to still have a relationship with us after we leave. So what does that look like? You gave us one example with the baby powder, which is great. And I think that, okay, wait, I'm going to digress for 1 second, because I think so many of us listening who have very spirited children have very similar stories in our lives. I have one. I remember my oldest, 21 now, and actually he is the editor of this podcast, so he gets to hear this story as he's editing. He was very quiet after a prolonged nap time. I was surprised that he was sleeping for so long. He had let himself out of his crib, the first time he'd ever crawled out of his crib, and gotten a hold of pink salve and Desitin. Pink salve is the more heavy duty version of diaper rash.
Yeah, I remember that. Yes. That is some thick stuff.
Talk about dating ourselves. And so he was squirting that on our lazy boy custom upholstered recliner rocker in the nursery, and then using it as a slip and slide. And so we got up there, and he's greased up from head to toe because he's only in his diaper. I think he was 18 months or 2 years at the time, hair sticking up everywhere, and this oil slick on my chair that never ever came out. We just did it as a badge of honor because it didn't come out. But it was the same thing. I had that moment where I was losing it. And then he was so excited to show me how he'd slipped and slid. And he didn't know that consciously that you didn't do that with it. It was just stuff he saw me squirting all the time. And this was a fun way to use it. And being able to pivot in that moment, it gives you great stories, but then also forms the connection in that moment. So kids know that they can make mistakes and you're going to help them fix it. We become more solution focused instead of problem focused. So tell us, as homeschooling parents, with all of this stuff going on in the moment when we're overwhelmed and we've got these kids over here and we've got to get out the door for therapy and we've got all this stuff going on, how do we even balance our parenting so that we are coming at it from more of a connection standpoint than a correction, instead of just, this is what needs to be done and this is why? What would you give practical advice to parents just wanting to get started in this idea of connected parenting?
Yeah, I would start by saying that even though it feels like that doctor's appointment or the schoolwork that you're this must get done at this time frame, at this time period, and that none of that in the big scheme of things matters if the relationship is wrecked in the process of getting into the doctor's appointment. And it doesn't mean we have to choose. Sometimes people hear me say that and it feels as though I'm saying the option is be passive or be this aggressive parent that's all about the timeline. And I actually really believe it can be both. We can be compassionate and firm, but the relationship has to come first. So if I'm feeling really out of sorts and I can tell I'm already getting dysregulated, I need to, as a parent, I just want to inspect that really honestly in myself and say, am I capable of getting everybody out the door or getting this thing done at this time without negatively impacting the relationship? And if I'm not, I would say it's okay to push something back or to cancel the doctor's appointment. If you can, that would be, if it's a doctor's appointment, you've waited for a year to get in. I'm not saying there's exceptions where you're like, even though I'm out of control, we got to get out the door. But for the most part, it's not that pressing. And there is a choice that we can make, even though our brain doesn't feel like there is, so that we can prioritize the relationship. So if we're already out of sorts, getting ourselves sorted out, trying to take a second to maybe step away, or even just, I would just lay on the floor in the middle of the chaos sometimes and just try to be quiet. And the kids would be jumping on me. But there was something for me about just changing the position of my body that would help me get grounded and prioritize what mattered. I had a 3x5 card in my back pocket to remind me of steps. It's, if you get dysregulated, these are the things to do, because in the moment I couldn't remember. The fight or flight would just kick in and I would just become the angry bear that was just like, we got to do this, because I wanted to be a good mom. That's where it was coming from. I wanted to do good things for my kids, and I knew they needed to do their math, and I knew we needed to go to the dentist. So it was coming from a good place. But yet, if I could prepare ahead of time and write out things for myself and say, if it gets to this point, this is a choose your own adventure life that I'm creating for myself. So let me come up with some branches that will serve the ultimate priority. Because if we consistently are overstepping, I don't know if overstepping is the right word, but doing something to chip away at the foundation of the relationship, we really have nothing.
Right.
Because parenting that's really all it is. They are just there as someone to help take care of them, and they've got to choose us to be their leader, so to speak. They've got to choose to opt into us. And that's going to create so much smoother flows in our day and to help get them to do the math. But we'd have to really be mindful. So I guess to summarize it, be aware of how you're feeling in your own body. If you're out of control, if you can, step away, do no harm, do the least amount you need to do to be a good mother, and then take care of your own needs. And also have a plan. If you know that consistently when there's a pattern that happens, plan ahead for it and write it out so that when your brain turns off, you have some kind of reminder to help you keep your senses about you. So I love that question though. It's a really good one, because in the moment it can feel very panicky and out of control.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the idea of creating visual prompts for yourself. We think all the time about our kids and helping them become the best versions of themselves by giving them visual cues. I've got checklists for my kids here and there. And especially if you've got any kind of neurodivergency going on in your home, you've got checklists and charts. Why not have them for us too? Especially because in those moments, like you said, the cortisol surge will make it so you can't make a good decision in the moment. And Absolutely. So writing it out, planning ahead, it goes back to the things that we do as parents. Like, we have the diaper bags with stuff for every kind of contingency, right? We have all of if our kids struggle in certain situations, we talk with them about those situations before we go, so we can pre-plan, so we can do the same things for ourselves. I love that. And I love the idea of keeping a little note card in your pocket or wherever about the steps that you need to take when you need that extra moment and that breath. The relationship piece, I think, is so important to remember. When we are parenting, and then when we're homeschooling and we're doing that too, we forget that it's not about bringing this like perfect product out to the world at the end, right? It's about helping them see the person they're meant to be. And that comes from a relationship. And so fostering the relationships with our kids so that they want to come back, they want to still spend time with us when they're older, is so important and easy to forget when we're in the day-to-day of parenting. So if you've been a listener of the podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about CTC Math for the last couple of years. They have been supportive sponsors of the podcast, and as I've told you before, I'm a customer. My kids use CTC Math in their homeschool. I am a paying subscriber and have been for a number of years, even before CTC sponsored the podcast. I am a raving fan, and I will continue talking about their resources and their program until long after I'm done homeschooling, because I think it's really versatile for so many different types of families, whether your kids are super strong in an area or super weak in an area of math. It allows you to customize their education when it comes to math. I've talked to so many families over the years that I want to share with you a message that I received from Sandy, a longtime listener who was content in what they were using until, again, they weren't, and they switched over to CTC Math based on a recommendation that they'd heard on the podcast. Sandy writes, "We too started using CTC Math following your recommendation, Colleen. One of my sons is so dedicated. Then, after watching over his shoulder, my other son started using it too. They both now do an hour each workday by choice. I even enjoy it myself. I do the lessons with them, which is a handy brush up, and will occasionally do some of the algebra lessons ahead of time. Math was not my strong suit in school, but now I love it, and I wish the program had been available in the 80s. Too many people think they're terrible at math, but I truly believe we all just need a method of learning that suits us. CTC Math seems to work for all three of us." So check out ctcmath.com or go to the link over in the show notes for this episode and click on it to go over there and see the offer that they have for podcast listeners. You don't have to just take my word for it. You can take Sandy's as well. CTC is a great program and could be a wonderful benefit for your homeschool. All right, let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, it's so easy to forget. Yeah. I like to think of it as you're a gardener. So you have this little mystery seed. They don't really know what kind of flower or plant they're going to be. You don't know either. And so it goes into what you're saying, like creating this environment where they can thrive and having to iterate on that process to figure out what they need. And each child is different. So this one needs a lot of sun. This one needs none. This one needs a lot of fertilizer. And this one needs a different type of fertilizer. And realizing that their potential is already inside of them. So it's not about me imposing my potential or trying to create the potential or facilitate the potential by forcing it out. It's just about me allowing that potential to come out because the environment is conducive to their growth. Versus the other one you mentioned, I think of it as the sculptor parent who sees their child as this raw piece of marble, and it's their job to chip away all the rough edges, and it's their masterpiece that they're going to present to the world. And look at this, but that's just not how it works, because as humans, we don't want to be changed, but we want to change. Right. So it's this imposed, and they can tell, especially with homeschooling, sometimes we overstep it. We're like, I need you to learn this. This is really important. And they can feel that. And sometimes even if they're quite interested in the subject, if we do that enough, they'll stop deciding they're interested in it just to be able to have the autonomy that humans want. So it's this dance that we play of, I want them to change and progress and fulfill their potential. And I need to be really careful that they don't feel me imposing on them and trying to change them. Because even if whether it's their behavior or their interests in school is different than mine, it's not a problem. And sometimes we think it's got to be fixed, and they're just symptoms of something underneath to be understood. And we can then help them become who they're supposed to become. So I love what you were saying. And it's really important, because if not, we forget and we violate some of the foundational truths about what it takes to create a valid and vital relationship. That's not the word I'm saying, but like a healthy relationship, so that it does help them grow and thrive, because that relationship is necessary. Fundamentally, if you go to developmental psychology, if they don't have a strong, secure attachment with an adult, it really is hard for their nervous system to be able to grow and thrive, because they're in survival so much. So it's absolutely essential.
Yeah. And okay, so let's build on that a little bit, because what you said in this conversation just now is something you talk about. And I think it thrives, or it goes right into the nervous system kind of discussion and like that. You say when we stop trying to fix the kids, they start to fix themselves. Can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit more about what you mean by that
absolutely.
and how that evolves? Because as parents, we naturally do want to fix. And I don't think so. I think that sometimes that idea gets a bad rap. I don't think that when we're faced with kids who have diagnoses or challenges or whatever, I don't think as a parent, it's coming from a negative place. I think that the idea of fixing our kids comes from the heart that we want our kids to have an easier life. We don't want them to struggle all their lives. So we know that whatever they're dealing with is going to make it more challenging for them in life. And we just want to protect them. So I think that when, you know how bad the internet can be sometimes, right? Like how people can just harp on what you say and how you say it. So I think that when people say I'm struggling and I need to fix this, or I need to help my kid get over this or whatever, I think that it's more often than not about something is broken in my kid and I need to fix it, or something's wrong with them. It's more, I know they're going to struggle, so I want to help them not struggle. But that said, we can go about it in a way that's not fixing, so that they are naturally working on those weaknesses, right?
Them tools and support to be able to manage whatever it is that they might need some extra help and support to manage. I think communicating, and I agree with you 100%. I don't think most parents are judging their kids really harshly because of a diagnosis or something they're struggling with. But sometimes inadvertently, we can communicate to the kids that something's wrong. Like something's not quite right with you and we need to fix it. And even though that's coming from a good place, I really do believe that. Like, I want to help you thrive and survive. We want to be very careful with our energy towards it and the way we speak about it, so that it's not communicated that something's wrong with them. Because what is neurotypical, what's divergent? It's so interesting because it's like, what if actually the divergent is actually more normal and the neurotypical people are the ones that are the off? It's interesting how we classify things. And a while ago, I heard somebody speaking, they had dyslexia. And there's a book, I think, called the Gift of Dyslexia or something. And they're just talking about all the amazing things that they were able to see and perceive, and how their brain worked differently, and how that was such a gift. And it caused some problems and it caused some challenges, and they had to learn how to overcome, that's the word,
right.
Overcome them, and so that they could survive in the world. But I love just being really careful in how I communicate to some of my kids about challenges they have, and let them know nothing's wrong with you, but I want to give you every opportunity to survive in this world. And this world has some rules and some ways it works. And the way this thing that you're struggling with, it'll be helpful if we give you some other things, or even if they have just really big emotions, I want to help you process those and learn how to be more emotionally resilient. And whether it's associated with a diagnosis or they're just a very highly sensitive person that has really big emotions. So just reminding ourselves, even though this might be challenging for me, and even though this might be challenging for our child, to just practice communicating that nothing really needs to be like, nothing's really broken. It's just you have a unique brain, and let's give you the opportunity to succeed, which I think is what they really are feeling anyway. But sometimes I think in our desire to have them be successful, we can get a little bit afraid that they might not have what they need. And we don't want that for our kids. Yeah. And to the quote you were talking about that I said, when we stop trying to fix our kids, the things that we thought needed to be fixed go away. I think it goes right along with what you were just saying. What I was just saying is, like, when we stop thinking it's something we need to fix, and our kids stop feeling that pressure, and instead we're just like, this is fine, and we're going to figure it out, and I'm here to support you. Those big problems that maybe our brain was cycling over become more doable and solvable. And if it's a behavior thing, oftentimes when we stop trying to control them and we build that relationship back up, something that seemed like an insurmountable problem that we're having behaviorally starts to dissipate as well, because the relationship is such that there's a different ability for us to communicate and give directions that they weren't open to before. So many times it just resolves in an almost magical way, because we stop trying to change them in a way that's not helpful. So I don't know if that answered what you were saying, or if there's more you want to dive into it, but yeah, I love the topic.
It does. And it goes along with just the whole idea of when we connect with them at a deeper level, then those other things just become part of who they are. And the strengths continue to grow, and then they help to bring up the weaknesses. One of my daughters has dyslexia, and we took a complete better late than early approach to her whole education, which I think is one of the best things homeschooling allows us to do, right? When we have kids who are struggling. And so she's never, ever experienced, because she's never been in school, she's never experienced having to be in a lower reading group or being pulled out for remediation. She just knew that, because I know that I've had parents ask me, what if my younger kid ends up being a better reader than an older sibling? And that happened with us. My younger one got math and reading much more quickly than she did. And she just says now, if she comes up to something she doesn't understand, she's 14 now, I have dyslexia, can you help me read this? It's just, it's okay. She asks for help when she needs it, and then pushes herself when she feels she can, because the relationships are strong, so that she feels confident in leaning into her own strengths and then admitting when she's weak in an area and needs support. So I think that what you said just feeds into that we can trust that as parents and homeschooling parents, that they're going to be able to grow into the areas that they need to grow in, because we are focusing on that relationship first.
So good. Yeah. And I love what you said, how she owns the dyslexia and it's not a problem for her. And part of that does still come back to the relationship, where she cares more about what you think than maybe what that other person thinks. And so again, that's the beauty of having that strong attachment with them, is it protects them from the judgment of others, which is so amazing. Just another benefit.
Definitely. Absolutely. Okay. So before we're going to start wrapping up here, but before we go, can you talk a little bit about your book? Because we've talked a lot about stuff that's in it, but I love how it's set up. I love that a lot of books just tell you the philosophy or the idea, but you talk about it, you talk about the reasons behind it, and then there's practical stuff in there. So can you just tell us a little bit about the book, how it's set up, and what parents can get from your book?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, love to talk about the book. It's one of those things I never thought I would do. So it's so fun that I actually wrote a book. It's amazing. It's broken up into 3 strategies, because I found that there's really 3 things that if we can focus on, parenting will start to shift radically. And the first one, and we've talked about all of them to different degrees here, but I'll say them clearly so people can see the buckets. The first one is we have to understand our own behavior so that we can leave room for our kids' behavior. If we're going into fight or flight and we're in our own emotional activated cycle in our nervous system, it's going to be really hard to understand what's causing us to do it. We'll probably think it's because of the kids, all because of the kids. So if we can take ownership and understand what's going on with us, it's going to be so much easier to understand them, or to at least give them some compassion and space when they lose their mind, because we'll have experience inspecting our own. So we've got to be inspecting our mind. What are we thinking? What's my nervous system doing? What are my triggers? And self-confronting and taking ownership for what is ours. Nothing more, just 100% ownership for what part is mine, and how can I support myself to show up in the best place so that I'm not getting dysregulated, even though the kids are getting dysregulated, and I can show up in that compassionate place. And then the second thing is we have to consistently connect. And as homeschoolers, we are with our kids a lot, which is beautiful and amazing. And in addition to that, just asking ourselves, is there moments I'm having with different children that I'm really present? Because especially as a mom of many children, which probably a lot of your audience has multiple children, it can be really easy to spend a whole day, and I'm with them all day long, but have I sat down and connected? Have I done something with undivided attention and a really high energy level where I'm as present with them as their best friend would be if they were over and playing a game? So getting really proactive. I call it making a connection plan. I'm like, we have a diet plan, we have exercise plans, we should have a connection plan, especially if everything about parenting rides on that relationship. That should be where we want to invest. And I don't want to invest in it like you would in Vegas, like randomly hoping that I get a big return. That's not going to bode. I want it to be like a pension fund. Like this is a long-term investment. And sometimes, just like a long-term investment, sometimes there's dips, sometimes there's peaks, but it's okay. It's going to feel all over the place, but I'm just, regardless, consistently connecting. And the third one is just learning how to, I shouldn't say just, because this is the hardest one, is learning how to choose closeness in those moments where everything inside of our body is wanting to either withdraw or attack or get frustrated. When they're acting really poorly and our brain is, what is happening better? And we want to go into that corrective mode to choose closeness and to be able to set limits if needed, but from a very compassionate, firm place, which having those other two strategies, those other two buckets in place first allows the third one to happen. We can't do consistently, like to consistently be able to choose closeness is really challenging if we haven't inspected our own brain, we don't understand what's going on, and if we haven't invested in the relationships. But if you've done those two things, to be able to start to practice how to choose closeness when things are really alarming for you or for your child. And so in the book, I've framed it up where we talk about those different buckets. And you're right. Like I did my best so that if someone, all they ever get is the book and they apply it and they do the exercises, it will make a difference. Like all of the stuff is there for you to implement on your own. And if you can just read the lesson, do the exercise, you're going to be able to see some shifts really fairly quickly, and also ones that will come later. But that's how I've structured the book. And I'm really proud of how hands-on it is, how it really is. Here's what I taught you. Here's an example of how I did it wrong or right. I usually use both. There's a bad example. This is a good example. And here's how you can actually take it and put it into real life, because the key is the implementation. Right. So many of us know all the things. I'm like, I know all the things. Why can't I do the things? And this goes with everything from exercise. I know I should be exercising. I know I should be eating these foods, but I can't always do them. And that's normal. That's just how new neural pathways are formed. We have the awareness, but to get our nervous system and our subconscious brain on board, it takes repetition, it takes practice. And so the exercises in the book are there to create opportunities for you to practice in your real life and implement it. So thank you for asking. It was a fun project, and I'm so proud it's out there.
It's great. And we'll make sure that we link to it in the show notes. I love that. And for listeners, you're busy. I know that you're busy. This is one of those books that as a busy homeschool mom, it's not hard to read because it feels like you're sitting down with an author over coffee. I think that you did a masterful job of just being approachable in your writing.
You.
The voice in there is like you're having a conversation, which I think are the easiest kinds of books for parents who are busy homeschooling, or even if you're not homeschooling, but you're really focusing on this kind of stuff at home in the margins of the busyness that goes along with being part of somebody else's schedule. Because as you've done both, the sending kids to school can be just as busy and difficult as keeping them home because you're not completely in control of your own schedule. And so this is definitely a doable read and one you won't regret. So check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a really good conversation. And I think that there's so much of what you do and what you talk about that we could unpack and have other episodes, because it's just,
I know, I'd love to come back. We could unpack. Yeah. We didn't dive deep. We did an overview, but you could dive deep into just one of the elements of it and get even more clarity. So
talk about teens and adult children, because that's a whole different thing. There's so many.
Or just emotions. Goodness, just that alone, we could spend hours and hours talking about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So if there's one thing, like one takeaway that you'd want parents, maybe they skimmed through this or they're doing dishes while they're listening, what is the one thing you'd want them to take for sure from our episode that we talked about today?
The one thing I would say is to be kind to yourself. As parents, it's especially, I'd say as moms, and I'm sure there's dads that fall into this category too, but we tend to be really hard on ourselves, and we have a tendency to be perfectionistic, especially when we're taking on their education too, because now we're playing two roles and it feels like I got to get both of these things right. And as long as we can remember that anything that's moving us towards our goal is progress. So even a failure, I don't love that word. And I don't even really think that it's a thing, as long as we are learning from every experience we have, even if it isn't what we wanted it to be, then it's really not a failure. Because it's the strategic byproducts that come from everything we do as we're headed towards a goal that allow us to create the life we have and allow us to develop more skills. So learn to be gentle with yourself. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn, is to be kind to myself. I was committed to be kind to my kids. I really was, but I could only be as kind to them as I was to myself. And I was beating myself up a lot. And when I realized, there's this correlation between my capacity to be kind and compassionate to my kids and my capacity to be kind and compassionate to myself. And that was the information I needed to give myself permission to be kind to myself. So it's never too late. In fact, some of the best learning happens in the middle of a mess up where I'm losing my mind and I have this awareness like, oh, I could choose a different way. Or when my child is having a big meltdown and I go in and I can connect with them, the ability, or not the ability, but the return on the investment in that relationship, what I get back, the bond that's created from me showing up when they're at their worst is double. So all these failures, whether it's our kids or us, where we think they're failures, all of them are for our benefit. And if we can leverage all of the things and never think that it's a problem, just be like, oh, this is good. I love this phrase. I've been starting to use it. This is good. And that just forces my brain to be like, oh, how is this meltdown good? How this morning I was telling you I had to take my daughter somewhere and it was a hard morning for her. Nothing from the hair to the makeup to the everything, nothing was working for her. And I just kept saying, this is good. How is this good? How is this? And I don't want to squish the negative emotions. I'm not trying to be a weirdly optimistic, but to help train my brain to say, where is the good here? Even if the good is in the hard, even if the good is, hey, I'm just holding space for her to process disappointment and frustration. And that's good because then she's learning to be able to have those big emotions without stuffing them down or being told something's wrong. So that's good. And how is it good that she's having those negative emotions? Because that's life. And that's good that she's feeling those and she hasn't turned her emotions off. So just realizing the benefit of everything that's happening is really there for us, not against us, is super helpful. So that's what I have to say.
I love that. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. Where can people find you online?
So website's connectmethodparenting.com. That's my Instagram handle as well. You can follow me there. And the book is by the same name and the podcast is by the same name. So anywhere you go, it's all Connect Method Parenting. And that's where you can check it out and learn more.
Great. Okay. So we will link to all of those things in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you are very busy and I appreciate you taking time to chat with me and share with our audience.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It was such a good conversation. Appreciate it.
So we will be back same time, same place next week with another episode. But in the meantime, you can check out all the things Andee and I talked about, including links to all of her resources, all of her sites and social media at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. And I just want to encourage you, enjoy your kids this week, take some walks, go on some adventures, really engage with them one-on-one if you can, and remember why you're doing this homeschooling thing. It's for them and build those relationships. I will talk to you soon. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.